Alrighty, this is one of them live YouTube videos, not from my car, about leading programmers, software engineering, technology, and management, leadership, all that good stuff. Today, I want to do a quick video on emergency mode. If you're watching, say hi in the chat window. But here's the thing. I was talking to a client this morning, and he was describing this situation. And it was like, look, I'm trying to do my sprints. I've got my team. We line it out. We plan it out. And all the time, we are getting pinged with urgent customer service requests. Like we can't go a day. We can't even go an hour without getting, oh, the site is down. This isn't working. What's happening now? Just kind of a constant barrage of problems. And then he used this phrase. He said, I feel like we're in emergency mode. And like my little brain just latched onto that phrase because I thought that's exactly right. You're in emergency mode, and you cannot be in emergency mode and in software development thinking mode, because they're sort of like one mode is reactionary. One mode is about dealing with the onslaught of problems that are coming at you. And the other mode is about structured cadence, structured thinking time, time without interruption. And of course, I'm speaking too about development mode. And I think it's useful for you to imagine that your team has two modes. Not that, and to maybe consider, are you mixing these two modes? Because in this case, he had just sort of looked at it as a big mess, right? He had a board. He's like, oh, this is the stuff we're planning for the sprint. And this is the triage of all the customer requests. So every day we're trying to do both. But of course, wasn't working very well. And so the mode idea, I think, is really valuable. If you're a Vim user, you're going to be pretty darn familiar with modes: insert mode, delete mode, navigation mode. There's a few different modes in Vim, but it is a modal editor in that you can only really be in one mode at a time. Of course, Microsoft Word as an editor and even I think Emacs is modeless. You can write and edit and delete all in the same mode. But software teams don't work best that way. So in this case, here was my advice to him. I said, so now that you've recognized that there's two modes, I want to ask you which mode is more important for you to accomplish the goals of the team and the project. After thinking about it, he said, you know what? Honestly, it's emergency mode. We have to get out of emergency mode before we can start reasoning and thinking and planning and focusing on delivering features. It's sort of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? We have to eat before we can choose what leisure activity we enjoy most. We can't even think about, do we go to the movies or do we play basketball today if we're starving? So in his case, emergency mode, these constant barrage of requests were causing him not to be able to think, putting the whole project at risk, putting the client relationship at risk. Just a really difficult thing. Now, the other thing, so first thing I said is I want you to cancel all your sprints until you're out of emergency mode. Great. And then I want us to start planning and leading and managing emergency mode. I want you to create a spreadsheet that every day, at the beginning of the day, I want you to get a count of the number of tickets that are currently open. And then I want you to also, at the end of every day, put a count of the number of open tickets. And then I want you to be able to essentially say how many new ones came in, what are the ads, and how many had gone out because they've been resolved or addressed. And he looked at me and he thought, I could see this look on his face, like, when we start to measure that, I can start to make sense of it. So even emergency mode, in your biggest crisis, there is data all around you. If we can keep our head, that's 90% of the battle. If we can keep our head, there's data all around us that we could measure. And of course, just like I would have done, he said, should I keep account by person or by issue type or by, categorizing the bugs? No, look, we just need our first set of metrics. We need to know if our team is able to keep up with the number of requests being entered each day. And what you're telling me, I think, is that it is a full-time job. And if the team not focusing on anything but emergency mode can keep on top of that and can meet the first goal. And by the way, your first goal in emergency mode is to just handle all the problems of that day. Anybody who's done tech support knows that your goal is to staff your tech support staff enough that you can handle basically all the problems, or 90% of the problems can be handled within a certain time frame. That's kind of an SLA, right? A service level agreement. So in his case, I said, I just want to know if you are staffed to handle emergency mode. You may find you're overstaffed. Your current staff has lots of spare time. You may find you're understaffed. You actually need to add more people, but you will know more about things, even if you don't categorize, if you start just measuring quantity. And he said, wow, I could do that in 5 minutes a day. That's right. Because, of course, like any good engineering manager, he said, I can build a system where I use the API and stop. I said, just stop. Just count the number of issues in Asana, count the number of new ones, count the number resolved, and put the total. Put those in a spreadsheet. Manually doing things that don't scale is one of the most beautiful things that Paul Graham ever said, because we as engineers love to prematurely build things to scale. All right. So if you find yourself in emergency mode, then it's time to take it seriously. And it's time to say, maybe I need to stop trying to be bimodal, both development mode and emergency mode. Maybe I need to focus on, instead of just always reacting to emergency mode, maybe I should manage it. The other part of this I just want to end with is him and I agreed that if they could meet their goal for 2 weeks, where they kept on top of every issue, they essentially could turn issues around in 24 hours, then they could have a meaningful discussion about how much more time was available at this team size to do feature work. And that would be in a discussion that was very important and inform the client and the users about how many new features should go into each sprint. Because instead of having the velocity as calculated by 3 people full time, I said the reality is you might have the velocity of half a person, because 2.5 people are over here on emergency mode. And by the way, it's still going to be really hard if you're in that mode and you have to service requests as they come in, because nobody can think when they're constantly having little issues come in. That's why most organizations create a help desk where the phone rings and a development department that's more like a library. All of this to say is, if you're confused about how to become more effective, maybe try thinking about it from a modal perspective. What is your development mode plan? What is your emergency mode plan? What other modes maybe are you in or do you see? And maybe it's time to pause one mode while you acclimate or increase skill or start to have better metrics about another mode, so that you can properly communicate and help your client and your boss and your users prioritize time. All right. This was my live cast from November 2nd. See you next time. Go out and talk to your team. That's the number one thing you can do to build a high performing management team. I'm sorry, development team, is talk to them. Thanks.